I want to talk about this scene from your book back in 2014 when you were the Beijing bureau chief for the Times and you were in Xinjiang looking for records about your dad's service in 1952. And I remember you calling your father in suburban Virginia to tell the bureaucrat about the base where he served with Kazakh and Uyghur soldiers. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your dad reacted to you being there?
Yeah. So you'll remember like the first slide that I showed from contemporary Xinjiang with the female herder and the sheep. That was from that trip. I went up. I would often take reporting trips for the New York Times to Xinjiang, and there was one reporting trip that brought me up to the area of Altai, which is on the border with Russia, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan, right at the very northern tip of Xinjiang, very remote area. Once heavily under Russian influence. And so I went up there and I went into the town. I wanted to seek out any documentation of my father's army unit. And so I walked into the civil affairs office in the middle of town after having checked into my hotel. I knew at some point the police would start looking for me because Xinjiang is a very sensitive area and border areas in Xinjiang are especially sensitive. And when you check into a hotel, you have to hand them your passport. They make a copy of your visa and fax it over to the police station. So knew that as soon as the police saw that there was a journalist in town, they would start seeking me out. So I only had, I thought in my head, a few hours to try and find any evidence of what my father and his unit had done there. So I went to the civil affairs unit, met a woman who was very helpful to me because she had once been an Army veteran and now worked with she had been once been in the Army and now worked with veterans as a veteran herself. And so she started trying to think of ways she could look up what my father's Army unit had done. But it was always a little bit hazy what unit he was in. So I had to call my father, who was, we were 12 hours ahead in China and it was morning. I think it was getting to evening in Xinjiang and it was morning in DC or Virginia. And he answered, and he was completely stunned that I was in this remote place that had taken him weeks to get to in the early 1950s, and that I was calling him from the middle of a government office. And he was puzzled what I was doing there. So that was one of those, like very bizarre moments where I'm standing in a town that my father had been in his very first posting. And then I was able to connect him with someone who had just been in the military decades later, and they were having this conversation about what his unit had done.